Have you ever held something so ordinary, so small that you didn't even notice it, and yet that tiny object carried the entire memory of a nation? In the palm of your hand, a silver and gold circle no larger than a bottle cap. You might spend it on a bus fare or lose it in a drawer. But that small coin, the 50 Kepek of Azerbaijan, hides a story that stretches from ancient empires to the fall of the Soviet Union, from oil fields beneath the Caspian Sea to collectors' showcases around the world. It begins as most stories of money do, with power, survival, and pride. When Azerbaijan declared independence in 1991, the world barely noticed. The Soviet Union was collapsing, 15 new republics were trying to stand on their own feet. For 70 years, Azerbaijan had used rubles printed in Moscow. Its economy was tied to the Kremlin, its symbols borrowed, its identity muted. And then, almost overnight, the people of Baku needed a new sign of who they were. Not just a flag or an anthem, but a coin, a piece of metal that every citizen would touch each day, a reminder that the country now belonged to them. In 1992, the first Azerbaijani manat was born. And with it, the 50 Kepek coin. It wasn't made of gold or silver, just humble copper-nickel, but it carried enormous weight and meaning. On one side stood the Maiden Tower, the ancient stone guardian of Baku's old city. For centuries it had watched merchants, invaders, and lovers pass below its shadow. Now it watched over a newborn nation. On the other side, the number 50, bold and simple, surrounded by elegant Latin letters spelling a word that few outside the region had ever heard before, Kepek. Most people spend it without a thought. A loaf of bread. A tram ticket. A phone call. Yet even in those simple exchanges, something powerful was happening. A new currency was teaching a people to believe again in their own worth. But history never stands still. Through the 1990s, inflation hit hard. Azerbaijan was rebuilding, oil prices were unstable, and the manat lost value faster than new coins could be minted. By 2005, the government made a bold decision, a complete revaluation. Old manats were swapped for new ones, one new manat for every 5,000 old. And once again, the designers went back to their drawing boards to imagine what the money of a modern Azerbaijan should look like. That's when the 50 Kepek coin was reborn. This time it was different. Bimetallic, shining like a miniature planet, gold in the center, silver on the outside. A coin that looked modern, European, and unmistakably Azerbaijani all at once. The designers gave it a map of the country itself, stretching from the mountains in the west to the Caspian coast. Every line, every curve told viewers, this is our land, complete and united. Around the edge, microlettering whispered Azerbaijan Respublikasi, the Republic of Azerbaijan, so finely engraved that you almost need a magnifying glass to read it. And if you tilt it under the light, the center flashes like sunlight on the Caspian Sea. Few outside the region noticed, but coin experts did. They called it one of the most elegant small-denomination designs in post-Soviet history. Collectors began trading them across Europe. Some claimed the symbolism rivaled the Euro's first series, others simply liked how it felt, solid, balanced, perfectly weighted at 7.7 grams. It became, quietly, the highest value coin in Azerbaijan's everyday life. Now imagine this. While billions of paper notes crumble and fade, coins survive. They move from hand to hand, from one generation to the next. Some end up buried, others travel across borders in tourists' pockets. Every coin becomes an accidental messenger. And among them, the 50 Kepek has traveled far. It has been found in Istanbul bazaars, in coin fairs in Berlin, even in the pockets of oil workers in Norway who once labored on joint Caspian projects. No one quite knows how many exist today, but the first bimetallic batch minted in 2006 is already becoming rare. Collectors now pay several dollars, sometimes 20, for a coin that, in its homeland, buys barely half a loaf of bread. How did this happen? Because rarity in the world of coins isn't only about metal, it's about meaning. People want a piece of transformation, a symbol of rebirth. And that is exactly what this coin represents. A country that rose from the ashes of an empire declared its own identity and sealed that promise in metal. But the deeper story hides in the details most people never notice. Why 50? Why that number? In Soviet times, 50 kopecks was a common coin, half a ruble. The designers wanted continuity, something familiar enough that people would trust it, yet new enough to feel proudly Azerbaijani. So the value remained 50, but the language changed, the design changed, and the spirit changed completely. When you flip the coin, you can almost feel two histories meeting, the Soviet past and the independent present, fused together in one bimetallic circle. And that is the beauty of money. It tells the story of time without saying a single word. By the late 2000s, the 50 kepek had become a small cultural icon. Children used it for candy, bus drivers kept handfuls for change, souvenir shops glued them into keychains for tourists. Yet the true enthusiasts, the numismatists, saw beyond its face value. They began cataloging varieties, minor changes in the font, slight differences in the rim thickness, microscopic mint marks that only appear under strong light. Each tiny variation could make a coin worth 5 or 10 times more to the right buyer. And this is where the legend starts to grow. Because somewhere out there, hidden among millions of ordinary coins, are a few misprints from the early 2006 mint-run coins where the edge lettering was stamped slightly off-center, or the inner core shifted just enough to create a double ring. Those errors, invisible to most people, are pure gold to collectors. Some have sold online for the price of a small gold piece, $40, $50, even $100. Not bad for a coin that was once worth half a manat. If you're watching this and thinking, wait, I might have one of those, you're not alone. Across Azerbaijan, people have begun digging through drawers and jars, searching for the shining circle with the tiny imperfection. Every few months, another story appears on social media. Someone finds a rare variant, lists it, and within days it's gone. And yet, for all its newfound fame, the 50 kepek remains humble. It doesn't brag. It just keeps circulating, passing silently through lives, carrying memories of the markets of Baku, the ports of Sumgayit, the villages along the Caucasus Hills. That's why numismatists call it a living archive. Because each scratch, each mark on its surface is a record of where it has been. Unlike paper notes, coins are survivors. They witness everything and forget nothing. As we continue this story, we'll dive deeper into the artistry behind its design, the politics that shaped its creation, and the surprising global journey that turned an ordinary coin into a collector's secret. So keep listening, because the next chapter reveals something that even most Azerbaijanis don't know. The 50 kepek may have been inspired by one of Europe's oldest coin traditions, and that connection could change the way we see this little piece of metal forever. Every great coin hides an artist's heartbeat inside it. Behind every curve and shimmer of metal there is a human story, someone who sat at a desk, staring at sketches, wondering what a nation should look like when reduced to the size of a fingertip. For the 50 kepek, that artist's task was almost impossible. How do you capture centuries of culture, oil, mountains, music, and hope in a circle of steel and brass? The designers looked toward Europe. The euro had just entered circulation. The continent was falling in love with sleek, modern coins. Azerbaijan's leaders wanted something that felt world-class, yet unmistakably local. So they turned to bimetal, the combination of two metals fused together, gold in the heart, silver on the edge. It wasn't only for beauty, it was symbolism made solid. The golden center represented the nation's spirit, warm and unbreakable, while the silver ring symbolized protection, the unity that holds everything together. Two metals, one coin, just as many peoples live within one republic. When you hold it, the edges catch the light differently from the center. It almost seems alive. If you move it slowly, you'll see a faint reflection, a halo effect, like the horizon glowing over the Caspian Sea at dawn. That was intentional. The chief engraver wanted the coin to feel like morning, the rebirth of a country after a long night. But there's something most people never realize. Its design also pays secret homage to an ancient tradition that began far from Baku. Centuries ago in the kingdoms of Lydia, now Western Turkey, the first bimetallic coins appeared. Gold and silver together, to prove that value came from balance. Azerbaijan's new coin quietly nodded to that history, linking the modern republic to the very birth of money itself. Meanwhile, within the rim, a delicate border of lines and microletters was added. Under a microscope, those lines look like waves, gentle reminders of the Caspian. Even the font of the number 50 was chosen carefully, strong, geometric, inspired by early Soviet type but sharpened for the 21st century. The goal was confidence. Every transaction, no matter how small, would whisper the same message: this country knows who it is. Yet design alone cannot make a coin legendary. What truly gives it power is circulation, the millions of hands that touch it. And this is where the 50 Kepek began to travel beyond its borders. A few tourists carried it home as a souvenir, unaware that they were spreading the symbol of Azerbaijan across continents. By 2008, it was appearing in coin swap groups online. Collectors in Poland, Italy, and Japan began asking for trades. They loved its clean design, its exotic script, its connection to a nation most of them had never visited. In numismatic forums, people started calling it the Euro of the Caspian. Back in Azerbaijan, though, daily life went on. Oil exports boomed, cities grew, and digital payments slowly replaced cash. But the 50 Kepek endured. For bus fares, for tea stalls, for school lunches, it stayed indispensable. And the longer it circulated, the more stories it absorbed. One coin might pass from a dockworker to a student, then to a taxi driver, then to a grandmother selling fruit. Each hand leaves a trace of a life lived. That's why old coins develop a glow that's not exactly dirt, not exactly polish, it's the sheen of history. Somewhere in 2010, the legend of the error coins began spreading. Collectors noticed a few 50 Kepeks where the inner core wasn't perfectly centered. At first it seemed trivial. Then someone sold one on eBay for $20. Soon more appeared, slightly doubled lettering, faint die cracks, minor color variations. To ordinary eyes, they were just coins with scratches. To experts, they were evidence of a rare minting anomaly, proof that even precision machines can blink. The idea caught fire. Videos appeared, people comparing edges with magnifying lenses, families emptying piggy banks. The search for the perfect imperfection had begun. But the real twist was still ahead. A researcher from the Azerbaijan National Museum of History published a paper claiming that the map engraved on the coin's surface hides a subtle artistic code. Look closely at the contours, he said, and you'll see that the border lines resemble the shape of a flame, a nod to Azerbaijan's nickname, the Land of Fire. Whether by accident or by genius, that small detail turned a national emblem into a spark of myth. Suddenly, the coin wasn't only about economy, it was about identity written in fire. And here's the part that surprises almost everyone. While most coins decrease in value over time, the earliest 50 Kepeks, especially the ones kept untouched, are rising in price every year. Collectors now pay anywhere between $10 and $50 for pristine first edition pieces. Special editions, sealed in presentation sets, fetch even more. In a few decades, some experts predict these coins might join the global list of modern classics, alongside the first Euro series or the commemorative Canadian loonies. Still, what makes the 50 Kepek remarkable isn't wealth, it's resilience. When economies crash, paper burns, numbers vanish, but metal remains. That quiet endurance mirrors the nation itself, shaped by conflict, polished by time, still shining. Think about this: every time someone flips a coin, they're performing a tiny ritual of trust. Heads or tails, yes or no, fate or choice, every flip carries belief that both sides are fair. So when a people mint their own coin after centuries of foreign rule, that simple act becomes a declaration: we choose our own fate now. The 50 Kepek is that declaration made solid. As the years passed, designers and mint workers moved on, governments changed, new technologies arrived. Yet this small coin stayed almost untouched. Unlike banknotes, it didn't need redesign. Its balance of color and weight was already perfect. So perfect, in fact, that the mint reused its core pattern for later denominations and commemoratives. In a way, every new Azerbaijani coin is descended from the 50 Kepek's design language. It set the DNA for a generation of currency. Outside of numismatics, few notice such things. But for those who study money, it's a masterpiece of minimalism, an everyday object elevated to art. Museums in Europe have begun displaying it in exhibitions about post-Soviet design. Beside it sit coins from Georgia, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine. Visitors often pause longer at the Azerbaijani piece, drawn to that quiet golden center. They don't know exactly why, maybe it's the warmth, maybe it's the mystery. And yet, even after all this recognition, in its home country it still jingles in pockets like nothing special. That's the paradox of icons, people who live among them rarely see their magic. The same happened with the British penny, the Indian rupee, the American quarter. Only distance reveals importance. So next time you hear the faint clink of small change, imagine that one of those coins might be a storyteller disguised as metal. Imagine the 50 Kepek whispering in that language older than speech, the language of weight, of shimmer, of endurance. Because in the end, every civilization leaves behind monuments of stone and words of paper, but the truest fossils of history are coins. And the 50 Kepek. It's still spinning. Spinning through markets, across borders, through time itself, carrying a nation's pulse with every turn. As we move into the next part of this journey, we'll follow that spin, across oceans, through collectors' vaults, and into the hearts of people who found meaning in a small circle of brass and steel. Because somewhere along its path, the 50 Kepek stopped being just currency and became a mirror showing what value really means. It's strange how something so small can travel so far. A coin has no passport, no luggage, no plan. And yet somehow it always finds a way to move. The 50 Kepek began its life in the mint of Baku, pressed in perfect circles, stacked in gleaming columns, sealed in crates. But once those crates opened, the coins scattered like seeds. A man paid for a train ticket, the conductor bought tea, the shopkeeper gave change to a tourist. By the time that tourist flew home, one little coin had already begun its silent migration across the world. In Europe, collectors noticed its clean geometry and unusual language. They posted pictures online asking, "What is this?" It looked familiar like the euro, but the writing was strange, beautiful, curved. The map was unfamiliar. And so began a quiet curiosity: who were these people who made such coins? What country lay beyond the Caspian? The 50 Kepek became a tiny ambassador. No speeches, no politics, no fanfare, just metal doing what diplomacy often fails to do: spark interest, respect, connection. Children in Germany traded it at school coin clubs. A French collector wrote an article praising its Caspian harmony design. Even in Japan, numismatists compared its bimetal composition to their own 500 yen coin. Without anyone planning it, this little disc was telling Azerbaijan's story in the universal language of beauty and precision. Meanwhile, back home, ordinary people never imagined their everyday change was crossing oceans. To them, it was just 50 Kepek. They used it for bus rides, newspapers, maybe a bottle of water. But every time one left the country, it carried something intangible, an echo of where it came from. There's a fascinating thing about money: it doesn't age like we do. It doesn't forget. A coin from decades ago still feels the same in your hand as it did when it was new. If you could listen closely, maybe it would hum with the vibrations of every palm it touched. And that's why collectors fall in love with coins: they are the only pieces of art that actually live among us. In the 2010s, as social media grew, people began posting short videos about rare coins and hidden treasures. Most were about American pennies or Indian rupees, famous markets, massive audiences. But then a few sharp-eyed creators noticed the 50 Kepek. They zoomed in on its dual metal surface, the embossed map, the faint inscription around its edge. The comment sections filled with surprise. "What is this coin? Where can I get one?" Some even claimed it was worth hundreds, spinning wild stories of lost treasure. And in that blend of myth and fact, the legend grew even faster. The truth, as always, is subtler but more beautiful. The ordinary 50 kepek isn't made of precious metal, yet its symbolic value far exceeds its face. Because in every nation's story there's one moment where the people say, "We define ourselves now." That coin is that moment, frozen in alloy. By 2015, major coin fairs in Europe were featuring the Azerbaijani set. Dealers would hold up a 50 kepek under the light, let it flash, and talk about its origins. Some even compared it to the Italian 500 lira of the 1980s, a design that had once symbolized rebirth after hardship. The parallels were uncanny, both bimetallic, both elegant, both symbols of a nation reintroducing itself to the world. But value isn't just measured in collector prices or rarity charts. It's measured in meaning. And the deeper you look into the 50 kepek, the more layers you find. Its golden core comes from brass-plated steel, durable and bright, representing resilience. Its outer ring, made of nickel steel, stands for stability and unity. Put together, they make something stronger than either metal alone, just as unity makes a country stronger than its parts. There's an almost poetic irony here. When the Soviet ruble collapsed, so did the belief that money could last forever. Inflation erased savings, destroyed trust. But out of that chaos, Azerbaijan's 50 kepek quietly restored faith, not just in currency but in continuity. People could hold it, feel its weight, trust its worth. It wasn't paper, it couldn't vanish overnight. It was solid, tangible hope. Now, decades later, some of those first coins are still in circulation. Worn smooth by millions of exchanges, their maps barely visible, their edges dulled. And yet, when you drop them onto a counter, they still ring with that clear metallic note, a sound that says, "I'm still here." Collectors love that sound. They call it the voice of authenticity. It's the reason why coin shows around the world often have that constant background music of small clinks and taps, people listening, comparing, learning. If you were to walk into one of those halls, somewhere in the noise you'd probably hear the faint chime of a 50 kepek being tested. A sound from Baku echoing in Berlin, or London, or Singapore. And that's where the modern story takes a fascinating turn. Because once coins start traveling this way, shared online, swapped across borders, they stop belonging to one nation alone. They become part of the world's collective heritage. A 50 kepek sitting in a collector's album in Canada is no longer just Azerbaijani, it's global. It's a bridge between people who might never meet. The more we look at it, the more we realize that this coin's real worth lies in how it connects stories. It links the past to the present, the local to the global, the practical to the poetic. It carries a message that even in a digital age where money becomes invisible, the touch of metal still matters. That physical connection reminds us that value began not as numbers on a screen, but as trust carved into metal. And perhaps that's why, despite the rise of online payments, the 50 kepek remains beloved. People keep it as a lucky charm, slip it into pockets during exams or travels, gift it to children as a token of good fortune. Superstitions have grown around it. Some believe if you give someone a 50 kepek on New Year's Eve, they'll have prosperity all year. Others say that if you find one on the street, it means your journey is about to change. All myths maybe, but myths have a purpose. They remind us that value is more than price. It's about meaning, about memory, about connection. And in that sense, this little coin has already outgrown its monetary role. It's not just a piece of metal anymore, it's a story we keep telling ourselves about endurance, pride, and identity. But there's one last layer we haven't explored yet, the emotional one. Because behind every symbol there are people. The mint workers who forged the first batch, the artists who designed the dies, the historians who preserved old sketches, the families who passed down these coins as keepsakes. Their stories form the invisible map behind the engraved one. And that's where our journey will go next, into the hearts and memories of those who touched this coin before any of us knew its name. Because sometimes, to understand value, you have to follow not the metal but the people who gave it meaning. Every story eventually comes home. And for the 50 kepek coin, home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. The sound of it sliding across a counter in a Baku cafe. the weight of it resting in a child's hand, still warm from their parent's palm. The quiet shimmer as it catches the evening sun. These are the small, ordinary moments that give the 50 Kepek its extraordinary life. But let's travel back one last time to the people behind it. In the early 1990s, when Azerbaijan regained its independence, the nation was standing at a crossroads between memory and future. There were no instructions for how to build a currency from scratch. Just determination and belief that a symbol could carry the spirit of an entire nation. In the government buildings of Baku, designers and economists worked side by side. Some of them had lived through the Soviet years, others were part of a new generation dreaming of global connection. When they created the manat and the Kepek coins, they didn't just copy Western models. They wanted to create something distinctly Azerbaijani, something that carried centuries of culture in its design. They studied carpets, patterns, and calligraphy. They debated how to represent the nation's geography, its architecture, its light. And out of those discussions came the coin's iconic image, the map of Azerbaijan, bold and unbroken, glowing at the center of the 50 Kepek. It was more than a map. It was a promise: we are here and we will endure. Now think about that, a whole nation, condensed into a circle barely larger than your fingertip. It's almost poetic that the same hands that hold that coin can trace their own story on it. From the Caspian coast to the Caucasus Mountains, from Baku's lights to Nakhchivan's quiet valleys, all of it engraved in one simple outline. That's the magic of the 50 Kepek. It transforms geography into identity. It turns metal into memory. As years passed, the world around it changed rapidly. Phones replaced wallets. Cards replaced cash. And now, digital numbers replace even that. But somehow, the 50 Kepek refused to disappear. It still finds its way into pockets, car dashboards, and old wooden drawers. Maybe because it reminds people of something real, something you can touch. You can't feel digital money. You can't flip it, spin it, or hear it. But you can hold a coin. And in that simple act, you connect to everyone who ever held it before. A grandfather who paid for his first newspaper with it. A mother who gave one to her child for luck on the first day of school. A student who carried it during exams, believing it would bring focus and calm. Every coin carries those invisible fingerprints, layers of life and hope pressed into metal. That's the kind of history that doesn't appear in textbooks. It lives in stories passed quietly from hand to hand. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe rewards those who pay attention. Because in the world of collectors, rare versions of the 50 Kepek, misprints, early mint runs, or special editions have started to fetch surprising prices. A coin that once bought a bottle of water can now be worth dozens, sometimes hundreds of dollars. Not because of gold or silver, but because of rarity and meaning. The irony is beautiful. The same object that was once almost worthless is now priceless to those who understand it. That's how value evolves. Not in the metal, but in the story we attach to it. And the 50 Kepek story keeps growing. Each year, more people discover it online, through photos, reels, and videos just like the one you're watching now. They hear its name for the first time. They look closer. And they realize this isn't just a coin, it's a lesson. A lesson that small things can carry big histories. That ordinary can become extraordinary when time and meaning meet. And that the most powerful treasures are sometimes hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to look deeper. In a way, the 50 Kepek has achieved something very few objects ever do. It has crossed the line between currency and culture. It started as metal and became memory. It began as a transaction and became a conversation. And that conversation between past and present, between nation and world, is still going on. So next time you find a coin, any coin, don't just spend it. Hold it for a second. Look at its lines, its marks, its weight. Ask yourself, whose story am I holding? Because somewhere in that metal, there's a heartbeat. And somewhere in that sound, that clean, ringing sound when it hits a counter, there's history singing softly to the future. The 50 Kepek isn't famous like the dollar or the euro. It doesn't boast of wealth or power. It whispers instead of shouting. But maybe that's why it lasts. Because real value doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be true. And so, as we close this story, remember this. The next time you see a 50 Kepek coin, don't just see currency. See courage. See identity. See resilience hammered into metal. See a nation that refused to disappear, and instead left its soul in the shine of a coin. Because this isn't just the story of a coin. It's the story of people who built meaning from metal. The story of a country that turned memory into value. And the story of how even the smallest piece of history can change how we see the world. The 50 Kepek, forgotten by most, understood by few, is not just a coin. It's a reminder that value is not created in mints. It's created in hearts.